Most farmers don't like sending their sheep to slaughter.
The stress level that I build up when I take them for slaughter made me think, no more livestock farming. I started thinking a bit deeper, not shutting off myself, thinking, oh, the animals, they get slaughtered, we eat.
Sheep farming itself isn't sustainable from a financial perspective without subsidy. One has to think whether these subsidies are going to be here long term.
It took me 3 years to find an answer. The Stockfree Farming was that answer.
It's fantastic growing vegetables. Financially, I am making more.
It's quite liberating, really.
Go for it. I did it, and you can do it.
My name's Dorothy Thompson and I live in the Scottish Borders. I'm a sheep farmer, but now I've transitioned into growing herbs and salads.
I got a very long surname, Sivalingam Vasanta Kumar, and I'm known as Kumar. And my previous farming background was livestock farming, mainly sheep, and used the meat at my market stall. And now I grow vegetables and use the vegetables to make dishes from my market stall.
I'm Michael. We've purchased this piece of land, about 20 hectares or so, and we're exploring ways to convert this from sheep grazing ground into something more productive, such as hazel orchards.
Come on, girls! Come on! Good girls!
And I came to farming very late in life. I got the opportunity to buy a piece of land. After I bought the land, I got a further opportunity to buy a dog business adjacent to the land and a cottage. So altogether there was 211 acres. My son and I were running this dog business, but he decided he'd rather do something else. So I decided to lease that business. And I had then the problem of the sheep that were on site. I had 35 sheep on site and my son had been looking after them. And someone said to me, well, why don't you do it? And I, in my stupidity, thought, well, how difficult could it be to look after sheep? They just stand in a field. When I started working with the sheep, I soon learned that it was a business, and to be able to make money you had to send your sheep away to market. Most farmers don't like sending their sheep to slaughter, but they accept it as inevitable, you know, for their living. But I just couldn't do that. It wasn't in my nature to kill animals for meat, so it left me a little bit of a problem. How to run a farm when you don't have the end product. So I changed the product from meat to wool. We produced Scottish Beaumont cloth, and a woman down in Macclesfield produced it into suits and scarves. So we had some return. When we weren't getting a steady income from the sheep, I had to decide what to do long term for the future, and I couldn't send the flock away in its entirety, and it was very difficult to sell Beaumonts because they were a specialist breed and there wasn't a huge interest in the stock. So it took me 3 years to find an answer, and the Stockfree Farming was that answer. I phoned Rebecca and she told me what our organisation did and that she had found a home for 100 cows in the last year. And I've punched the air when I came off the phone and I said, she's the woman for me. Anyone that can find a home for 100 cows can find a home for 33 sheep. Within the fortnight, she had kept in touch, and lo and behold, she phoned and said that she had found an animal sanctuary down in Norfolk, Hillside, and they were willing to accept the sheep, and I just couldn't believe it. But at the same time, I had decided that I would follow what I wanted to do. I set up an area on the farm that was rabbit-proofed, and I started to make raised beds on the farm so that I could produce herbs and salads. And then I also discovered I quite liked flowers, so flowers came into it as well. And I found that there was a big market in the Scottish borders for organic vegetables and herbs and salads. I don't use any animal manure or any animal products, and that is really well appreciated by the shops and the restaurants and the hotels that I supply. And I deliver most of my produce by electric bike, and my customers like that as well because they know that it's local and it's sustainably grown and delivered. Once my sheep are away, I'll be able to concentrate more on the winter time, and I'll be able to produce all year round, and as much as possible use techniques that don't require heat. In my greenhouse at the moment, I use water in big containers and small containers, and it raises the temperature of the greenhouse and offers some protection. If it's a hot summer day, the water in the containers will heat up and then it dissipates the heat during the night time. So instead of just having a summer income, I would be able to sell my produce to all my customers during the winter as well.
So the spinach is fantastic. We harvested yesterday evening. It's a good feeling that when you harvest and use it at the market stall. My ancestors are farmers back in India, and we come from a farming generation. My family farmed dairy mainly, and that's where agriculture started from childhood. I spent a lot of time in my childhood working on the land and then going to school. That triggered me to go and study agriculture. So I went and did a formal agriculture degree in India. That made me to move to England to study a master's degree in sustainable agriculture at Y College, which is the University of London. So I bought 20 acres of land near Launceston, and with the idea of building a flock of 100 sheep and using that meat on my street food market. As coming from a Hindu family, cattle are sacred for me, and I was a meat eater. Livestock farming is my livelihood, and I loved it. It's the stress level that I build up when I book them to take them for slaughter. And that is where everything started. And I load them into the trailer, I drive, I go to the abattoir and I unload them, and they wouldn't come out of the trailer box. They can smell it. And that was upsetting me and started making me to think, do I have to do this? I started thinking a bit deeper, not shutting off myself, thinking, oh, the animals, they get slaughtered, we eat. But I started thinking a bit more, and that made me think, no more livestock farming. It was amazing. We found a lovely, very good sanctuary in Worcestershire, and then they took 90 of our ewes and a ram and 20 lambs. I still remember, I even videoed it. It's opening the trailer and then they just all went out. And that was the best thing to say, wow, they'll just live and have their natural death. And that was the best thing ever happened in my life. Interestingly, a friend of mine, I was talking to him and I told him one day, hey, I want to farm here, but I want to live on the land. My plan was to grow vegetables that is required for the street food market. And he said, yeah, go and see Ecological Land Co-op. They have a good model. And then I went and this plot was available. This is the first growing season here and it's fantastic. It just worked out exactly how I wanted. That's a bit of a dream come true to farm. There was a big demand and the demand is growing. And there are meat eaters who stay on my queue, but they love the vegetarian, vegan meal that I cook. And it's a very healthy meal and I have a long queue. And I sell out. I sell around 90 dosas in 3 hours, which is impressive in a small town on a small market. After I moved to Parkford Hill, I had this idea of raised bed, no dig system, and it was interesting I got in touch with Stockfree Farming and they were very, very helpful. And with their advisor, Ian Tolhurst, who came to the farm, and he spent a whole day looking on the ground and gave fantastic advice how to start the process of cultivating. From the financial point of view, it's fantastic growing vegetables. Financially, I am making more by doing, say, I'm only doing 8 markets a month, and that's for me financially enough to keep me going. I can do more, I can do festivals, etc., but that transition made it easier. So in my new plant-based system, which is 5 acres, we have 2 large polytunnels and an agroforestry system and a forest garden to grow most of the required vegetables that I could use it on my market stall.
We got interested in this piece of land here over in Carrick in South Ayrshire, 20 hectares or so, former sheep grazing, and we're exploring ways to turn that into a more productive use like hazel orchards. I was keen to do something to show that something could be done with these former sheep grazing fields. You know, it's clear that sheep farming itself isn't particularly sustainable from a financial perspective without subsidy. And you know, one has to think in the long term with the pressures on public expenditures and such like whether these subsidies are going to be here long term. So I think it would be good for people to look and consider alternatives to what's always been done. I'm interested to see what we can do to improve the productivity of the ground in a sustainable way, but also to preserve and enhance the biodiversity and the environmental sustainability of this type of ground in this area. It is very marginal land, very steep, not particularly useful for conventional agriculture. Thinking outside the box really, what could be a more purposeful use for this land going forward. Historically, hazel is a native tree or shrub that grows in profusion in this area, and we thought what would be the potential for growing this in an orchard on this former sheep grazing ground. Hazels are really suited to southwest Scotland. Everywhere you go, every hedgerow more or less, that you'll find hazels self-seeded and growing happily. I took the view we're not fighting nature if we go hazel. We're looking to establish a hazel orchard in small scale in the beginning, using more commercial varieties that can give us a greater yield per hectare. Here we've got an area of planted hazel trees, the native hazel but planted. They're doing really well, as you can see. Really healthy looking trees, throwing up plenty of shoots. Because these trees do so well in this area, that gives us real confidence that when we come to plant the commercial variety of hazel, that they'll also do well here. I was researching online about hazel, more commercial hazel growing in Scotland. I came across a lady called Gina who's working with introducing different varieties of hazel, including some commercial varieties up north in Sutherland. And it was while I was looking at her information online that I noticed the organisation Stockfree Farming. And from that I made contact, and we've been working together on this particular project ever since. They really have an offer to help people with really at the concept stage of new initiatives to differentiate the land use away from traditional stock farming. And the offer really from Stockfree Farming was to get involved and to help flesh out the initial ideas. And that's really an important thing, to go from the initial concept to actually getting something down on paper in terms of either the planting plan, the variety types, the costs of them, their availability, how they potentially could be laid out in a pattern of a nursery on the ground, how that could be converted into an orchard in due course. Different methods of propagation have been looked into by Stockfree Farming as well. the potential gross income, cost and thereby net income that potentially could accrue from X hectares of ground turned over to hazelnut production in the southwest. And this is where an individual coming at this kind of unusual project really could struggle without this assistance from a third party like Stockfree Farming. My long-term ambition in terms of producing nuts here, hazelnuts, would be that we find the possibility of establishing the consumption of nuts and hazelnuts in the diet of Scots in a way that doesn't really take place today. They're a very nutritious, concentrated form of calorific intake, and they form part of the food culture in so many other countries that there's no reason, in my view, why a proportion of our nation's calorific intake couldn't come from this particular source, a very sustainable source, and one that maintains an open landscape and really from that perspective fulfills several objectives at the same time, really.
It's quite liberating, really, knowing that you don't have to have the responsibility of animals, and you can always find something that you love, then you can make it a way forward for stock-free farming.
If you're a farmer and considering giving up livestock farming, my advice would be to get in touch with Stockfree Farming. Just go for it. I did it, and you can do it.